And what we're going to talk about in this last panel to kind of wrap up the discussion is the notion of activating purpose. And I think Jim referenced it on the last panel. There's this notion that you can't just talk about purpose, you can't just produce the big anthemic advertising campaign which pulls at the heartstrings. You actually do need to activate it in a meaningful way. What I like about this program with the Super Bowl is that it's not only the most giving, philanthropic, sustainable, et cetera, but also this notion of being the most participatory. And I think that's a really important dimension of what we're trying to do at Impact with technology that allows purpose-driven brands to scale those programs and invite their stakeholders in. And in fact, we're going to hear a little bit more about the play your part, but all of you can play your parts a little bit later. So Robin is joining us on stage. Also like to invite Amar Sharani, who is my partner at Impact. He's the chairman and founder of this company that's bringing this phenomenal technology platform to the world. So please. I'm not going to do like Neil. I'm actually going to stand through this panel, in part because this is a very tight stage. So I'm going to step to one side as I invite Robert Schermers, who is a partner, senior partner at Innate Motion, which is a purpose-driven brand consultancy that's done some phenomenal work with Unilever, notably. And Robert actually spent 18 years of his career at Unilever, which I think I might argue, and Jim might agree, is giving P&G a bit of a run for their money in terms of building purpose-driven brands and purpose-driven organization. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Gabriella Isler to the stage. Gabriella stepped down as Miss Universe in January of 2015, and she's been doing some phenomenal work in the area of philanthropy, which has been recognized, by the way, by the Vatican and by the United Nations. We're very pleased to have Gabriella here. She's also our Chief Millennial Officer, our partner as we've worked to bring the Play Your Part campaign to life. And I'd like Robin actually to talk a little bit about his company is called the Citizen Group, so that notion of the citizen brand, and then how you bring that to life through work and through communications.
Sure, thank you. Yes, the name of my agency is called Citizen, based here in San Francisco, and the name was motivated. I'll put a plug in for a book I recommend to everybody. It's called Citizen Brand, written by Mark Gobet in the early 2000s, and his thesis was that sooner or later all brands will have to behave as citizen brands. If it wasn't always a good idea to do the right thing, now it's an imperative, increasingly becoming an expectation to show your bona fides in areas that are pro-social in nature, brands are like citizens. So that's the thesis, and I'd just like to use a little of my time to reference the rise of the green sports movement, because it is a movement, and I've been privileged to be a part of it for about 12 years now, with one team. It was an NFL team, in fact, and I have some slides.
Yeah, can we run the slides?
And then I'll go through this quickly because I know this is a panel, but I think a time capsule referencing where this has gone in the past decade is important, relevant, and that is it starts with a team, one NFL team, the Philadelphia Eagles, progressive ownership, Jeff and Christina Lurie, and they were inquisitive and they wanted to green their team. They didn't know how. Frankly, we didn't either. I was part of a group with the great Alan Hershkowitz, who's now the president of the Green Sports Alliance, which springboarded from Natural Resources Defense Council. This was just one project within NRDC, how to green a team. And we did the supply chain audit because we knew it couldn't just be surface. You have to walk your talk, and I'm referencing many of the remarks already made. Green is more than just the color of our jerseys. There had to be a backstory. And in fact, before you could talk about it, you had to make sure there was fidelity within the operations. I'll tell one quick story about a transformation, and that was toilet paper. In that audit, which Alan, as a senior scientist, conducted, he found out that the toilet paper that the Philadelphia Eagles were using was sourced from bald eagle habitat in the Cumberland Plateau. And when that came to the attention of the owners that we were using bald eagle habitat, cutting down bald eagle habitat for our toilet paper, they looked at each other, and I can remember it clear as day, husband and wife. It was like, well, we can't have that. Liability, clearly. So they very politely asked their the partner, Kimberly Clark, we can't have that. We have to change it, or else we'll lose your contract. And that created a chain reaction. That bit of inquisitiveness and willfulness created a chain reaction. Examining all the supply chain operations. And they've done a lot of remarkable things. You can look it up, Philadelphia Eagles. And then came the fun, fan engagement, because once the operations are in order again, you can start to activate. We did a bunch of silly things like trash the opposition, but recycle the cups and things like that. But it became embedded. It was embedded into their mission statement. And not just the polysyllabic word sustainability, but the idea of health of our, which references athletes as well as the environment.
And so on the theme of fan engagement, if we can talk a bit about Play Your Part, how did you develop that?
So, that gave rise to the Green Sports Alliance and MLB, NBA, NHL. They've all adopted this. So there's a lot of programs in play. That's the point I wanted to make. Now we come to Super Bowl, and thanks to the host committee, the sustainability committee, Neil's work with Keith and such, you teed it up, and we were grateful that Impact came to Citizen and said, how can we create a campaign to support this agenda? Hence, Play Your Part, and I'll just high speed through, show you a spot and pass it on. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can see the site online at playyourpart.org, which is part of the host committee site. High speed through.
Where you can make a pledge, incidentally, and we've had phenomenal engagement with people making pledges on that site, directing their good coins, and then appearing on the leaderboard, which is also displayed on that big screen up there. So it's beautiful.
Good. So there's all kinds of banners and social and that kind of stuff, the fun, creative stuff. But in deference to the panel, I just will show, if we could run the spot, Ethan, that would be great. We produced this spot that will run on ABC and CBS.
So what makes Super Bowl 50 different from other Super Bowls? Well, let's see. It starts with where we play and how we get there. What we bring and what we don't. What we consume and what we conserve. How we power down before we party down. And how we pay it forward to help local nonprofits while also entering to win cool prizes. Come on, people, this is Super Bowl, the Bay Area way. We're on a mission to go full-on berserkly and make this the most sustainable and giving Super Bowl ever. Visit playyourpart.org and join in.
We're very proud of that spot, and also of the fact that that spot is getting airtime now on some of the major channels here in the Bay Area. It's also, for those of you who have worked in marketing or advertising, I can say this is one of the cheapest Super Bowl commercials that's ever been produced. Although, hats off to Robin and his team for what I think is a fantastic job with that. I'd like to shift gears a bit and ask Amar to talk about something that is a big passion of his, which is this notion of connecting business and giving back. It's something that he's dedicated a large part of his life to. Amar has a line that I absolutely love, which is, you can't just dream about change, you need to engineer it. And Amar is an engineer by training, and has actually been instrumental in building this technology platform that we're bringing to the world. But I was wondering if, Amar, if you could speak a little to the science behind the platform.
The challenge that I had personally with purpose, or activating purpose, is that it's more of an art than science, and it's very hard to code art, I think. So there's actually science behind activating purpose, and that's how we build the platform, and it's based on this research that done by Professor Norton from Harvard Business School. And what he did, he was trying to, he thought that if happiness is the ultimate purpose of the human existence, then if we can make happiness a commodity, and then we can allow people to trade it, then maybe we can actually spread happiness easier. So he asked a question, he said, can money buy happiness? And I think lots of people will have different answers to say if you can or not. But what he did as a researcher, he said, you know what, let's do an experiment. So they took a group of people, they measured their happiness, they gave them a small amount of money, $5 to $20, and they said to half of them, by 5 o'clock today, take this money and buy anything for yourself. For the second part, they said, the second half, they said, take that money and buy something for somebody else, or give it to a charity of your choice. And then they measured their happiness after 5 o'clock. They found that Group B were much happier than Group A. And they thought initially maybe this is because it's in North America, people have more money, there's more culture of giving. They ran that experiment in 132 countries around the world, and consistently, even in the poorest countries, people who gave away the money, they were much happier than the first group. They ran this for employee engagement, so did the same experiments, they found amazing results, which actually, it's not that different from what Jim found in his book. They found that when they gave incentives in cash versus pro-social incentive or social good incentives, the ROI on the second one was 5 times the money that they spent, but the performance of that versus the cash was 20 times higher in there. So they said, would that work on customers? So they ran an experiment with email marketing, and I think with the Creative Barrel, and they gave, instead of just like a discount to the customer, they gave them something that, the same amount, but something that they can give to a cause of their choice. And they found that the open rate doubled, and the click-through rate quadrupled. So that became the core of the whole science of giving. And I think with that, and understanding the power that this moment of directed giving, when it's not money, just you have to dig deep in your pocket and take out, but it's something that you got because of your purchasing power, because of something that you've done, because you being a customer and being appreciated in that sense, that actually drove much higher engagement and much higher results in terms of loyalty and referrals. And that became the core of the purpose activation. I think it's not, giving is not purpose in general. Giving is the road to purpose. It's the way to discover and create a common thread in your organization, where now everybody is aligned around something that the company is giving the people the power, the employees, the customers, to direct those contributions or these profits that they were talking about, where not me as the CEO, I decide where that money goes, but the employees and the customers actually make that decision. And that changes everything. It brings purpose to focus for the whole organization. And then we see the results that we saw in that research and what Jim said.
Companies love to talk about giving back, we're giving back. But often those are boardroom decisions where people sit around and say, oh, let's give money to this charity, or my golf partner is head of that charity, let's cut them a big check. And I think this notion of what we call people-empowered giving, which is inviting your stakeholders in to actually participate in that purpose and be able to play a role in how that money gets directed, is a really important part of what we've been trying to do at Impact. I'd like to turn now to Gabriella, who's not only the only female member of our panel, but the youngest. And as I mentioned earlier, Gabriella, you served as Miss Universe for a year. I don't know if Steve Harvey was in charge of the emceeing, so you didn't have the indignity of being named and not named. But talk to us a little bit about the engagement with millennials in particular, because you're of the generation, and I think it was referenced earlier in the panel, that actually does want to participate in brands that are values-driven. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I do believe the millennials are the first generation to grow up alongside corporate social responsibility. It's the first generation in which history and always connected is essential. It's a generation that shares their life every day through social media. So we're expecting the companies to be equally transparent. We're expecting the companies share their values, their beliefs, through social media, everywhere. I mean, more than 1/3 of the millennial community have gone online and researched the business practice of the companies. So definitely is a community that is not defined by a paycheck. It's not defined by the workplace. We are defined by purpose. It's a community that is usually looking for careers that give you meaningful and values and purpose. They want to work in companies that are actually working for the common good. So I'm very proud to be millennial. We're changing things.
The statistics say that 71% of millennials, they want to work for companies that have higher purpose. So if you really want to recruit these kind of people, you want to have that clear up front.
Yeah, and I think that's both for employees, obviously for customers. Robert, you worked for 18 years at Unilever, as I mentioned, a company that today has reoriented a lot of its work around purpose, led by Paul Polman and Keith Weed. And Dove, for example, that Jim spoke about earlier, is a Unilever brand that's actually captured this notion of inner beauty or real beauty as being a point that resonates. Talk a little bit about the insights behind that and some of the work that you do at Innate Motion.
Yeah, so we at Innate Motion, so first of all, excuse me for my funny accent. If you think it's double Dutch, it is Dutch. So it's a very strong accent. So raise your hand if you don't understand and I'll repeat it. Innate Motion started in 2007 with the whole concept of purposeful branding. And two of the companies that were mentioned earlier by Jim, Coca-Cola and Unilever, they quite early jumped onto to how we work and said, okay, there's something in there. So since 2007, we've been working with a lot of clients to develop purpose, to help them develop purpose. And what we always say to all of our clients is, too often, and it came back a little bit earlier as well, purpose is seen as a cost. Whereas we see that if you have a purpose, it's an asset. If you really take, as a brand, your profound beliefs to the heart of everything you do, you're not talking about cost anymore. You're talking about bringing an asset to life. And what every business should do is invest in their asset instead of cutting costs. So when all businesses would say, okay, if we authentically drive our purpose and bring it to life, you will see a massive change happening in the business world. And in that sense, the business world will contribute to making this world a better place. And you see a lot of brands accepting that now, saying, okay, we should see purpose as an asset and invest in it as such. Then when you look at brands, you can do it at 3 levels. You can see brands that have ideas, they inspire the world, they bring great ideas to the world. Very nice, but what you see the millennials now want is to be able to contribute to it. So you see brands that bring behavior change suddenly start to grow far faster. Lifebuoy, a Unilever brand, is all about educating kids to wash their hands. And in the poor countries, they literally survive because of that. There's millions of kids dying because they simply don't know how to wash their hands and that they have to wash their hands. So when you jump on that and say, let's create a behavior change, something happens with that brand. You create business, yes, but you also have an impact in the world. But the last category of brands that we see now is people want to contribute to what a brand does. They want to be part of a brand. With all the social networks that we have, with everything that we have, they want to be able to contribute to making the change happen. And that is, I think, one of the biggest changes to make it look back to the Super Bowl that we see now. People are not being talked to, they are part of everything. They are part of the community, they are part of the movement that we're trying to create to make change happen. So I think that's one of the things that we push a lot at In Motion. Guys, Jim asked, why is it so difficult to make change happen? And why do companies struggle to bring a purpose to life? Because it takes courage. It takes courage to say, this is who I am as a brand, and this is what I stand for as a brand. And just to make the final one, and why I have this ball here, what we did is In Motion during our Christmas cards, sending out a Christmas card, you can say something and you say, guys, have a fantastic Christmas. But we basically provoked people to say, okay, do you guys as businesses, do you guys as corporates have the balls to give, to start create a change in society? And we literally did with the One World Play project, we did this activity saying, okay, let's enable people to give. We make funds available and people can give it to a charity of their choice who can help the One World Play project, but have the courage to start contributing to a better world. And that, guys, takes courage. That takes a lot of work, but when everybody would do a little bit more of it, we are sure that the world would be a better place and businesses would grow bigger because people want it nowadays. And so that's a little bit the philosophy that we have as In Motion.
That's great. Robin, back to you for a sec, because you showed some work that actually helps bring to life and draws people in. So I think there's the commitment up front, there's the leadership, there's the courage, as you just said. There's the creating the mechanisms for participation, but also you need to draw people in. So whether it's balls to give or play your part, there is a role that communication can play in this. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think, the principles of marketing don't change. Awareness is a prerequisite to engagement, which is a prerequisite to behavior shift, and the sense of participation. I think we all clearly see that's the opportunity in front of us, particularly in, again, the green sports space, because my observation is I've seen a decade of getting the plumbing in order, the supply chain stuff, but legends, the food concessions, the apparel makers, they're all under scrutiny and some are leaning forward. They're actually seeing the opportunity, and that's fantastic. That's the place we're at now. But in this next decade, the opportunity for fan engagement is so rich, so rich. I mean, there's, I'll give one example of a project that's percolating right now called Mascots Forever. And there was a meeting between NFL, NBA, NHL, I'm forgetting one, MLB, all together. That's a rare thing to get them all together around a program called Mascots Forever, based on the observation that more than half of the professional sports teams have animals as their mascots. And half of those are threatened or endangered in the wild. Cougars, panthers, and you can go down the list, grizzlies, timberwolves, what have you. And so this kind of mobilization, you may not have been able to have that conversation 10 years ago, but it's in front of us right now. And how you can activate that at a local level, by the way, because still from a fan's perspective, your allegiance lives at the local level with your team. So you have to tap into that local pride, but then you create awareness, then you create engagement, then you create behavior change.
And on this notion of the intersection of purpose and sports, so the theme of the symposium this morning was purpose and the power of sports. I wanted to talk to you, Gabby, about some of the work that you've done in the area of human trafficking, because I think we were talking about this yesterday, and when we think about sporting events, I think sustainability and the work that's being done here is phenomenal. Gabby's done some amazing work through her Universal Blessings Fund, recognized by the Vatican in the area of human trafficking, and unfortunately, there is conjunction or correlation between big sporting events and that issue. So if you can talk to that.
I do believe it's not a surprise for anyone here that when we're talking about major sport events like the World Cup, the Super Bowl, it's a lot going on outside. And this, especially this year, this season of the year is which is where I'm sorry on my Spanish. I came from Miami, so I'm like switching back. But especially this period of the years which the mass trafficking is happening. In the world, more than 21 million men, women, and children trade back modern-day slavery. And during the Super Bowl, during the meantime that you're watching the game, maybe one person like up to this rank, and 26% of their kids, their children, and they're forced to sell their bodies for money. So it is a lot going on around human trafficking, and I have the pleasure to work with SIM, it's the Scalabrine International Migration Network that works with the Vatican and Pope Francis to abolish the modern slavery. And it's a very small but very powerful organization that we're doing our best to combat this tragedy. It's happening every day.
And I think the notion that big organizations like the Super Bowl can step up to make a difference, in this case in sustainability. And obviously what's been running throughout the discussions this morning is the role and responsibility of business to step up to make a difference. Amara, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what was the original impetus for you to say, how can we change the face of philanthropy in some respects? So the typical, let's just cut a check, and that insight of saying we can get businesses to play a role and make a difference.
I think it's, people have a power. It's called purchasing power. So if we can actually use that purchasing power to make a difference, I think we can do amazing stuff. So most people and companies, they do philanthropy in terms of giving. They just write a check and give a donation to something a cause that they are connected with. But the fact that as a consumer or as a person, I have always to think about a conscious decision in everything that I do. When I go to buy, I have that power to decide I'll buy from this or this, and if that decision is linked to something that can result in giving back to something that I care about, that's where the power becomes exponential. Because if we can all now tap into not just the giving budget, which is, by the way, globally, it's very small compared to the marketing budgets of all these companies, the incentive budgets that they create for their employees, their sales force, for their customers to buy stuff. I mean, that's an amazing amount of money. And if we can actually show companies that you could use the same amount of money by diverting it to social good incentives instead of regular incentive, you as a brand will gain a lot. You as a company will have 89% more loyalty by your customers, 71% conversion of your sales, amazing results and transformational. Data that can actually drive better results than the normal way of doing business. But at the same time, you're empowering the people. They feel great, they feel happy, they feel that they're actually making a difference in the world themselves. And also at the same time, the causes have access now to revenue stream that they never had before. And I think that's the power of connecting, this notion of connecting every purchase with a purpose. Here, and then empowering the people to decide that. It's truly, I believe it's a great triple win. Everybody wins.
And I think on that point, Gabby, you were talking about the Pope's commitment.
I just want to add something that is a quote that I love. As you mentioned, we have the power of purchase. And as the Pope Francis say, a purchase is a moral act. It's not just an economic act. So that's our goal as a generation. I mean, we want to make sure that before you purchase something, you see all the options that you have on the table and you make the best option. Because this company is purpose-giving, this company is socially responsibly active. So I think we have so much power in our hands right now. We just need to make sure that we're making the best options. Decisions.
Robert,
yeah, what for me was when I started in Unilever in the 90s, it was all about, marketing was about creating fans. So what you basically saw as the role of your brand, it was, they are supposed to be cheering for you as a brand. Which when you look at it is totally ridiculous. Because you as a brand should be humble enough to say, I serve the people. So what we in Emotion always say, we don't use the term consumers, we use the term the people we serve. Because that forces you as a marketeer to have that humbleness to say, what am I actually doing and who am I actually serving. And what I like a lot in what you guys said, and the way Omar described it as well, you go back with all these possibilities that we have now as a brand to putting yourself at the service of the people, putting yourself at the service of society, and enabling society, enabling the people that buy you, the people you serve, to give back to that society. And because of the technology we have now, because of these platforms that are there in social media, in Uber also, all the technology we have, and specifically things like impact, I see that lifting off big time soon. Because it is actually bringing essence of marketing back to serving people, enabling people. And that is what makes the difference as a brand. So that's why I'm so excited about events like this again, enabling people to make the decisions. Not you as a brand where the money is going to, not you as a brand deciding which purpose you're going to support, but together, work together in making this world a little bit of a better place.
So we do have a few more minutes before we wrap, and I would like to see a hand going up immediately. Question from the crowd. Yes.
Enormous gratitude for all the change you've demonstrated, and thank you, Gabriella, for mentioning not only did Pope Francis, but 25 of the world's faith leaders sign declarations to eradicate modern-day slavery, and that's linked to the supply chain demonstrations and communicated in the way you have. We're starting to make change. And then I just had a question. Next year, when you send your holiday card out, do you have the ovaries to make change?
And that's an absolutely right challenge. Perfect. Yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
So there's business before purpose and now business after purpose in this sense, and the integration of in the past we went to work and then we went home, and in our private life we did our good work. And now we've integrated those two things. What have any of you learned about the impact, aside from the obvious things of, we're still learning even how to use how to create the right language to describe what this is all about. So what has changed about your perceptions, and then what do you think the future, how does that bode for the future in what were the unanticipated outcomes of integrating personal mission and purpose into the workaday world?
Let me answer that with an experience that I had back in my advertising days. About 10 years ago, I helped the Mars company relaunch Pedigree brand, and Pedigree has become very much like Pampers, a purpose-driven brand around everything we do as Philadelphia dogs. What was interesting about that story was that when we talked to the Mars family about why they had gotten into that business in the first place, the answer was, well, we thought dogs deserved good, nutritious food. And in fact, what had happened was that they had forgotten that organizationally and culturally. They had moved to become kind of a traditional packaged good, sort of similar to what Jim was describing at the Pampers days of like your baby's butt dryer. And essentially what we ended up doing, I was on the agency side, was reminding them why they were in the world in the first place. So purpose in that respect is not really new. I mean, a lot of businesses actually started sometimes 100, 150 years ago with a very clear purpose of the founder. And what tends to happen often is that companies develop process and they develop within a competitive set ways of building their brand that actually don't refer and stray away from the original purpose. So that's something
on this. So here's actually the research what they show. So when you create these kind of incentives for employees, for example, where they can direct something from their work and from the company's profits and doing work to something that they care about, the results show, and this is a study done in London in one of the universities, productivity of employees increased by 13 to 30%. In the lowest level of employees, like the people who are least productive, it increases up to 30%. In the other, on the overall organization, around 13%. And that's cash, that's money for the companies. So I think at the same time, for like what we said, 71% of employees say today, millennials, that they will not work for a company that does not have a higher purpose. So these two interests are merging together, and that's what they're coming in here. And I think a company that does not do that and recognize that, they're going to be the losers. I mean, in economies, there will be winners and losers.
So on
you
that
go
note,
this way or that?
yeah, because we're out of time. So on that note of be a winner, don't be a loser. don't forget to play your part. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming out early.